Hello, everybody, and welcome to Coffee with Casters. My name is Gangly.
And my name is Clement.
And we are here in Alicante, Spain. It is currently 11:52 p.m., the day before rehearsal. We just finished up writer's room and wardrobe stuff for the day, and now we're all kind of catching up on prep. Part of the prep that Clement and I decided to do was to make this podcast where we're going to talk about some big picture stories at the World Championship and the Tactician's Crown.
We're got yourself there.
Yes, we're going to mess that up a lot this weekend, I think.
Yeah, we have rebranded. The entire name is Inkborn Fables Teamfight Tactics, Tactician's Crown. I think there's way too many syllables, but
yes.
we'll get it figured out.
So as a part of our prep, one of the things we wanted to do is go through all the storylines of the players, of the regions, and it's a good way, I think, to kind of hold ourselves accountable in a way, too, right? We can kind of like talk about the things we know and then ask questions about the players that we may not be as familiar with.
Yeah, from each other's regions, I don't watch all that much NA, so I'm going to have to rely on my co-casters.
Yep, and I don't really watch much of APAC at all. In fact, actually, I would say many of the players, apart from like the stars, I have really had almost no exposure to.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a good catch up for both of us. So anyway, we can kind of kick it off. So let's start first, I think, like big picture for the regions. So obviously we had the merging of all the sub-regions. APAC, I think, is like, as the Westerner, the region that I think many people just like don't know much about. Because
True. Like, it's a very new region. I think most people understand like East Asia because that's been from the start where you had Korea, Japan, and Oceania, mainly Australia and New Zealand players. But in Season 8, we had the Southeast Asian players come in, and finally those two regions are now combined in Set 11 to form APAC. Now, the distribution of the seeds are a little bit hard to remember, but the general big picture is Vietnam is the big region, and then Korea is the second biggest region, and then all the rest of the servers are combined to basically be called APAC within APAC.
Okay, so Vietnam is biggest, then Korea, then everything else.
Yes,
kind of
Vietnam,
exists.
for like a reference, is actually itself bigger than the entirety of EMEA.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Very popular server.
Now, Vietnam, I noticed, only has one rep here, though.
True.
We can't ignore that.
That is very true. So unfortunately for Vietnam, I feel like this is just a fluke accident. I feel like they have a ton of strong players. A lot of people will know YBY and Piva. These are probably their internationally most well players.
Box boot camp participants. Oftentimes they do exceptionally well. YBY especially is like always popping off in North American ladder early set.
And this is something that I wanted to mention because you brought up Box. A big reason why some of them might not be here is because they actually missed their first two ladder snapshots due to Box. Now, that's a personal choice. I think, Box, doing everything you can for the community. But we're not seeing a lot of the famous names. Vietnam performed pretty poorly in cups. And, I asked a lot of Vietnamese players about this. And, the answer I got was really interesting. There's two centers of tech in the TFT landscape. One is North America, and the other one is going to be from CN. Yeah. So Vietnam, in terms of the APAC landscape, doesn't really have the language edge like Singapore or the TW server would have, or they don't have really the base like KR does sometimes. So honestly, this was a pretty poor set from them.
Yeah.
And they're sending Asta, who is very unknown as a player.
And we'll get into the numbers later. And Asta, I think, has a lot to prove going into this weekend based on numbers. If you're just looking at stats, I think Asta's a pretty heavy underdog. But we won't. Let's not leak.
I'll be very surprised if he wins.
Let's not leak anything. On the flip side, we had the Americas, right?
Yes.
So North America, my region, a region that's done exceptionally well in the last few sets, has merged with Latin America and Brazil. On the whole, North America showed up across the entirety of the set to perform exceptionally better than both LATAM and Brazil.
I have heard Milk talk a lot about it.
Yeah. and the
probably more than I wanted to.
And LATAM is kind of divided. Latin America South, Latin America North. Latin America North especially struggled. I mean, I believe their regional AVP. Yeah, well, the first is, it's kind of a cyclical thing. They don't have a lot of top players. They have Relic, which people know from Set 10 World Championship. Outside of that, Mbappe, some people remember him from World Championship run in the past. I forget which one. Outside of those two players, though, and I'm probably not doing them perfect justice here, but there's really not a deep pool of talent. In fact, they're the only two Latin American North players that we had at the regional finals were Relic, who had a very poor set and made it through snapshots alone. He did not make it through qualifier points, and Super Pino, who didn't even make it out of day one in any cup.
Oh.
So they were heavy underdogs going into regionals, and it did not really surprise me at all that neither one of them made it too far in the event. On the flip side, Brazil did better than I think a lot of people thought. Many people in recent World Championships have pegged Brazil as the weakest region because they haven't made final lobby. I don't think ever, or at least not since set 3 when Slooper was third place.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And I think they surprised a lot of people by being the middle ground between Latin America and North America. Even at the regional finals, we ended up with 2 Brazilian players in the final lobby, Toddy and Eoso Lucas, who did end up making it to the World Championship. So I think Brazil impressed a lot of people, despite the fact that on the whole their stats were not impressive. They were better than the expectation. And North America did quite well. So I think the nice thing about the merging of the Americas is a lot of North Americans learned the stories of Brazilians and Latin Americas, and now I think there's a lot of Americans kind of holding on to the Michael storyline, Michael versus Altanawe for the Latam Gold, and Bob Zera, who's one of the world's representatives from the Americas, who rose up through the ranks exceptionally quickly. So there's a lot of cool stuff, and I did like that aspect of the merging of the regions, that it felt like we were kind of learning about each other and growing together as one big region. So, okay. You want to get into some player stuff?
Yeah, sure. Another big region from APAC is definitely Korea, and this was the region that was hit hardest by the merger in terms of slots, because they used to have 4 guaranteed slots, and now they only have 1. But what surprised us was Korea is, I'm not even sure why, but they're incredibly strong throughout. They had champions in the first cup, the second cup. And right now, they're really sending their best. You have Dr. O and Bintum, who's pretty much the household name in terms of APAC coming into Worlds. So I think Korea, in terms of the volume of players that they're actually sending to these finals in day 3s, is the highest among the regions for sure. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's dig into some of these actual players' stats and stories. We'll try not to spend too much time on each one, but let's start with Korea then, since we're on it.
Okay.
So we are interrupting your programming right now to let you know that the video stops about 30 minutes into this recording, and we wanted to make sure that we could showcase our sponsor's microphone, Mauno, who hooked us up with a PD100X so that we could record this on the go in the hotel room. It was super easy. We just took it out of the box, plugged it right in. It's got XLR and USB capabilities. It's got full LED functionality, so you can customize it however you want. A quick mute button, a volume knob, makes it super easy to set up. Sounds great. We're using it for just the 2 of us, and it honestly sounds pretty good for...
No EQ, no nothing.
Yeah.
Just running with it.
So all things considered, great pickup. Definitely make sure you check it out. They've been really great to work with, and they hooked us up so that we could do this on the go. So thank you to Mauno for sponsoring this show. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming. So the first I have here is Dr. O. So Korean rep, like you mentioned, did he win one of the cups?
No, he didn't win any of the cups, but when he made it to the day 3s, he had the highest average placement.
Yeah.
So in second and third, he was already in top 8 territory.
Okay.
Super consistent player. I really like watching him a lot because he has his preferred lines. He's a big mythic player, plays a lot of Exalted early. You kind of expect what you want to see from him, but then there's a lot of variations and different spots that he's willing to take these lines in.
The thing that stood out to me when I was looking at his stats were he was the APAC AVP leader in terms of who made it to Worlds, 3.91 AVP, which is a strong, respectable AVP. I will note it's not none of the APAC reps seem to have dominated all 3 cups. There was one rep, I believe, that did compete in all 3.
Yeah, Moji is the only one that went
Made
through
it to
all
day
3.
Yeah.
And he's from the TW server.
And even him, though, it seems like he kind of... The quality of his advancements were not too crazy.
No,
right?
they were not
It's not like he was destroying everybody
He
every single
made
game.
one finals in the day 3 in like the top 8, but the rest of them were like he made it in, but kind of stopped there. Yeah.
Okay, so Dr. O, you'd peg him as one of the favorites from APAC?
I would say he's like a solid A tier player.
Okay.
I think there's S tier players we'll get to later. But the thing I do want to mention about his stats is like he's super consistent. He's not very high first place rate. A lot of like
middle placements.
Second place, third places, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And almost rarely 8th place. So, top 4 type of player, likes the lines that he likes.
Yeah, it's reflected. His top 4 rate, 66%, is even just at a glance, at least top 3. Yeah, it looks like top 3 in the entire world's field. Actually, a lot of the APAC players in general, I know podcast listeners, or however you're listening to this, you can't see this, but a lot of the APAC players in general have quite high top 4 rates. So I feel like there's maybe some leaning toward the top 4 oriented style, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I want to say, like, in this meta, the player differences is really about how you save those low-rolled games. A lot of times on 8, you're just not going to find your desired carry, and it's up to the player's skill to kind of save that in finding alternate lines. So a lot of the great stuff is how good are you at those top 4? It's not even the top ones.
All right, moving on to the next player in APAC, which is going to be, I'm sure you know him, I know him, we all know him, Set 9 World Champion title.
I am so glad he's back, because for a long part of this set, we thought he was going to take a break and, just spend some time doing whatever he liked. He actually did this in Set 8, where he just took a set off. So at the start of this set, he only day 1'd Cup 1 and Cup 2, and then Cup 3, he was like, wait a minute, this goes directly to Golden Spatula? I have to try hard for this. He tried, it was good result. He didn't make it in still, but then we had a forfeit from the Japanese leader point in summertime, and that gave the second place title a chance. And we still were not very hyped on him. Day 1, he didn't perform well. Day 3, he really brought it on. And what we call title in like the APAC is we call him the protagonist. Because when it counts, this guy is killer. Like, he has the highest finals AVP of any player alive. It's a 2.88 AVP. If he hits that finals, he's taking it home.
That's crazy. Yeah, title, I think there's he's one of those players that has like an aura at Worlds, right? And obviously the nature of winning a world championship, the way in which he did it, 4 games. That's the fastest. That's the fastest world championship ever, right? Yeah. So never before had someone won the final day of Worlds so fast. And the fact that, he comes from Japan, a smaller region naturally, and that he's been so iconic in the region, right? The fact that obviously he didn't make it through ladder snapshots, so there are other players in Japan that are quite strong, and we've seen other Japanese representatives that have even done, fairly well at the World Championship before. But I think the fact that he's been to Worlds multiple times, that he's such like a known face in the scene, makes him feel like that main character.
It feels very hard to overcome, and he puts a lot of pressure in those final lobbies. He won the last game when it came to Golden Spatula, and I will say this, if Title has another good run, in my eyes, he will knock off Huan Mie as the GOAT of TFT. I am willing to make that statement.
Okay.
Yes, because if he does that, he would have been in 4 Worlds, and let's say he makes finals this time. 3 of them would be finals appearances, and at least a silver and a gold. I think that would put him over Huan Mie. I love Huan Mie.
Yeah.
He's my all-time favorite player, but...
Okay, that's something to keep in mind for sure. That's something to think about the entire weekend. All right, let's keep going. Forward is Steppy from Singapore. Now, this is a player admittedly, and this thing, like I said, this podcast is a part of our accountability of talking about who we do and don't know all that much about. I've heard, since he's qualified, a lot about Steppy. Until Steppy qualified, I can't actually say that I knew all too much about him. Apparently, though, there's a lot of hype around this player.
He has been the best Singaporean player for a long time, ever since Set 8, where we were able to qualify. And something that he's very similar with Title and Bintam is that he has a lot of these very weird alternate lines. What I describe about him is that he's able to judge the lobby strength and know when he can play some of these, not exactly highest cap lines, but good tempo lines and lines that the game kind of gives him itself. So one of the best memories I've seen of Steppy in the finals is he hit Wandering Trainer with Reapers in Behemoth, and he didn't play either of them. He got a Zoe 2 on stage 2 and said, I'm playing Story Weaver. So he beat everyone off the spot, and then he took the AP line and then still advanced.
Unbelievable.
First place in Golden Spatula. I'm so glad he's our first seed. I think it's been a long time coming. And I feel like Steppy has a lot of like similarities, maybe someone like Dish Soap, where he's known to be more of a loner in terms of like prep.
In his prep.
Yeah, he does his own prep and comes up with a lot of different lines when it comes to the actual tournament.
That's cool. I do love that kind of archetype in the scene, the player who doesn't, they don't want to be in the echo chamber. They want to be a free thinker. They want to come to their own conclusions. I think it's important that we have people like that, especially in this era of TFT that is so... I don't want to say marred by stats, but it's like the stats influence everybody, right? And so it's cool when there are players who say, yeah, I'm going to use stats to still inform my decisions, but they're going to be my decisions and not just what everyone else is telling me. That's cool to have in the scene. And we didn't say this before, but when we were kind of talking about like tier of player title, we both agree S tier
player.
Okay,
Easy.
Okay, Steppy, where would you put him?
Steppy, I would put him on the same pedestal at S tier. I think you could make a lot of arguments that Steppy this set is actually better than title. Like as a whole, I think it's fair to say that he's been better than title.
Okay, wow, that's very interesting. I think personally, in my kind of power index,
if it comes to like worlds and finals, I'm probably taking title because he's been there, done that. But
so you're saying S tier among APAC competitors?
Yes.
In the world field, though, are you thinking like maybe upper half or upper quarter?
I would say solid A plus, probably not S, but solid A plus. I think a reasonable expectation for Steppy would be somewhere between like 14th and 10th. I think that's where I would put him. Okay,
sounds good. Now let's move on to NA's favorite villain, the Korean rep.
I can't believe you guys call your comps.
It's Bintum. Okay, now Bintum is a known name for a known name, not an unknown name. A known name for many people in TFT. World Championship run in set 8.
He was 4th and 9th, and the last set was his worst in terms of performance. But, I think everyone deserves one set off.
Yeah, everybody gets one. Everybody gets one. That's just how it goes. But yeah, so Bintum last set was last set, right?
Yeah, last set was not so great for him because I think Bryce put too much pressure on him.
Yeah. So the story goes that Bintum going into the set 10 World Championship made some, I believe it was actually more of just like a passing comment, right? It wasn't
I think it's more of a cultural difference thing. I don't even think he, was directing at anyone. Right. It was just like in Korea, we would not call our comps like that.
And so he was unhappy, generally speaking, with how North America would do this. When we were playing a reroll comp, you'd call the comp and then slash Stefan. Like, this is mine. Nobody can test me. I'm playing a line.
It works.
And it does work. It does work. I absolutely understand why that feels offensive and suboptimal.
I'm not sure in terms of like his translation if he actually said offensive. I think it's just like culture shocks. Like I can't believe you guys are doing this. Why would you do that?
Yeah. But regardless, I feel like now people in North America, we think of Bintum and it's like, we're hate watching Bintum like he's the villain. Bintum is a respected world caliber player, and I think is one of the more iconic Korean reps that we've had in the World Championship.
He's on T1 now, and this is going to be his 4th world appearance, again tying Hwan Mie.
Wow.
I would say he's the best, most consistent player in APAC this split. He's the best player in APAC. I'm very comfortable in saying that. He scrims a lot, so in global scrims for Golden Spatula, basically everyone's played Bintum. Every split, he's the one in the scrim.
He is a scrim grinder.
Yes, and he's always performing really well. And I think Bintum is again a player that does do a lot of different lines. He had some very memorable lines. One I always remember is when he was playing Ghostly Zyra, couldn't find his Zoe, subbed into Syndra regardless, and went top 3.
That's cool.
All of these lines, this is what I'm going to remember about players, is how do they save those low roll situations. Because, for you viewers out there, it's normal to not hit your desired forecast in one roll down. The actual average gold you need to hit your forecast is 67 gold. It's very high, so it's always 2 roll downs. It's a multi-step process. And how players transition, whether by capping themselves lower on a 3 cost or finding a substitute, that is what actually defines good players and the best players in terms of average results.
Okay, yeah, that's great to know. That's something to watch out for. I think the entire weekend is when we see Bintum, especially during these pivotal moments in his games, how is he salvaging low roll and how is he capitalizing on high roll. I want to call out, he, as far as I see, is the highest top 4 rate and among the lowest 8th rate. So this guy's clearly in the and honestly, quite frankly, 20% top 1 rate over 65 games. He kind of actually has everything. He's a real renaissance man of TFT. High top 4 rate, high win rate, low 8th place rate. His AVP 4.02, solid. That's a good AVP to have. Mm-hmm. Again, it's not dominating the field, but what that tells me, is that he's probably converting a lot of low roll into 4th place finishes and converting a lot of high roll into 1st. And that's really all you can ask for at the end of the day.
Yeah. If you high roll, it's actually very difficult to tell player skill difference in this game. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Next up, we have Kade, the OCE rep.
Oh, this one's a fun one.
Yeah.
So I just want to explain how he qualified. Basically, we have one guaranteed slot for the TW server, for JP server, and for the Korea server. And then the rest of APAC combined has one guaranteed slot based on QP. Kade got in fairly early, actually.
Really?
Yeah, Golden Spatula. I think it's like early day one Golden Spatula is pretty much guaranteed in already. Very consistent player. And I like him because he's very unique in that he's very open about what he likes. He loves Seraphine. He's an AP reroller. And you can see most of his lines are in that line. He plays a lot of, I call Fairies comp, which is basically like the Zoe variation. Sometimes Tahm Kench, sometimes Diana. He also gives Arcanist a shot a lot of times.
Okay.
And of course, if we're talking about AP reroll, you got to mention Janna, Lux.
Yeah,
that's going to be kind of like his big 3, I would say.
Wait, let me ask you, because I heard a lot about this Princess and the Frog comp, this Fairies plus TK. How prevalent is that in APAC? Because I feel like I heard whispers about it. I never actually saw someone play it in a legitimate series.
So I have photographic evidence of Bintum playing it. It's definitely a line that he can pull out, but the general thought process behind it, it's a bit lower tier than something like Ghostly Zoe, because Ghostly Zoe, in terms of the mechanics, it just works out a little bit better.
It's like the ramp up of
the
Zoe.
Spectre transfer is instant, and you get the extra 25% DPS every time you kill someone. So that like snowballs a lot better than say like a brawler frontline.
The two synergize with each other, right?
Yeah,
or the ability and the synergize.
And honestly, Tahm Kench was always, you re-roll that because everyone's taking the other three costs out of it. It's more like a cheap option.
Makes sense. And sorry, we didn't say it before. Bintum, I think we both agree. I'd put Bintum S tier.
I have him S tier as well. Like I think I think his peak probably isn't as high as Tidal.
Yeah.
But this set, in terms of like consistency, showing up all the time in scrims and cups, and I put him first.
Okay, now Kade, who we were just talking about, I put Kade C tier, and this is, again, compared to the Worlds field. So C tier means middle of the pack.
Yeah.
This is your 16th through 24th place finishers. To me, when I look at Kade's stats, 4.3-ish AVP, that says slightly above middle of the field within his own region, right? Considering 4.5 is average, 4.3 means you have an edge. I don't know if that small edge translates enough to a meaningful edge against the most elite. And I'm not going to pretend AVP is like the perfect stat.
Yeah, we'll get to that pretty soon.
It doesn't tell the full picture, but to me it is definitely a part of my framework of how I rank and value players. And so it's hard for me to ignore that when ranking him. For that reason, I put him as C.
I think that's totally fair. I think he's a little bit more limited in terms of comps. And also just like the pedigree in general. Like, he's been to Worlds, but his last Worlds, and he jokes about this openly, was a 32nd last place.
Yeah. People, on average, do better the second time they make it to Worlds, right?
That is true.
The
Worlds experience is very rough for a lot of, like, I think for outside of NA, it's usually pretty rough because you have to deal with ping the first time.
Yeah.
And it's located in Chicago. Yeah. I'll be honest, like, to all those NA fans out there, you should probably detract your placement by like 0.2. I think the ping difference is kind of like that.
Yeah, especially on the one-on-one stuff. It makes things all the more impressive when I think of what was his tag? 8L jaywalking from set 4 when he won the world championship, and it was like heads up and he actually got the out position against who was it? It might have been an EU player or something.
It's very hard to outposition against NA because what happens is players from APAC, they can't do anything in the last like 0.16 seconds. So what you can do in NA is you can actually watch an APAC player and swap your board in 0.16 seconds.
Just react.
And because the APAC player can't do anything.
They have to guess, and then they hope that you're not looking at
their board.
Okay, so Kade, we both kind of land on C tier in the field. We'll move on. Jazz Latte, one of two Taiwanese reps going into the Tactician's Crown, and I think probably among the most iconic of this group, like alongside your title and Bintam, I think Jazz Latte for the Western audiences is someone people know because he streams and
Box.
He's
always talking with Emily. Shout out to that.
All right, so what's your thought on Jazz Latte on the whole?
So Jazz Latte, I think a big picture is that the TW players, all top 8 players, are in the same study group organized by Moji, which we'll get to later. And this group has been incredibly consistent. They take 6 positions out of the top 30 in terms of QP. They all have very similar like game understandings. They work together a lot. So I think the general level of the study group is extremely high. Right. Jazz Latte, he is known to be more of a tempo win streak player. He does particularly well when he finds those spots that he really likes, and he will contest other people for it, for better or worse.
Okay.
That's reflected in the stats.
Yeah, definitely.
But I kind of consider him as sort of like a pit bull. You know, he bites onto you, he doesn't let go. And he goes for the win. Okay,
so his stats are slightly worse than the other ones we've seen. I'm curious, though, do you think he's better? Because his stats right now, slightly worse than 4.3. Do you think he's better than his stats indicate?
When it comes to tournaments, I actually would say that I would put him below Title, Bintam, and Steppy. That for sure.
Okay.
He was on part of my EWC team. I was his manager, but I gotta be honest.
You've got some ties to him.
Yeah, I definitely think he's like a solid A tier, but not really in the S tier. And for him to, if he's going to make finals, I think he's going to have to get some pretty good roles.
Okay. So for just clarity, on my personal power index, I put him B tier. I felt like for where his stats are at in APAC, I wanted a tier that felt like for how iconic and how respected he is in the scene, I wanted to bump him up a little bit because I don't think his stats really.
They don't look great.
They don't look great. But I
do
do think that in the international scene, he's considered to be better than, at middle of the pack. And so for that reason, I kind of put him in a B tier. Now we'll move on to, we've got 2 more reps from APAC, and they are the 2 worst performing in the stats, but not necessarily in QP and like in the actual cups.
Yes.
I think there's like some stories going on with them. Well, we can start with Moji.
Yeah, Moji, that's the way it's pronounced. And this is actually a longtime competitor from the TW server, but he really got his breakout this split. I call him the synthesizer because he learned a lot from Vietnam. I'll be honest, I think Vietnam is probably cheering for him a lot more. Probably even more than their own representatives. So he was, he's great friends with YBUI, he's great friends with Piva, and he organized a lot of the kind of like scrim group to grow out of it. His stats are bad because honestly he qualified before even going to Golden Spatula, and he was very adamant in saying like, I'm limit testing here, guys. I want to see if this works.
He said that before.
Yeah, like he knows that he's kind of limit testing and he's not going to play the same way. And I think that's fine. It does drag your stats down, so that's why we have to be careful. Stats aren't everything.
Yep.
But the big thing is he's the only player out of APAC, and there was like 250 something players that played in the cups. He's the only player to make all 3 day 3s.
And that's an important thing to consider when you're looking at stats because you have to consider advancement rate when you're looking at AVP. The more games players play and the more games they play against a tougher field,
your AVP actually drops.
Right. You would expect the AVP with every game played in a tougher field to get closer to 4.5.
True.
Right? And so when you consider that he then went into Golden Spatula purely limit testing and probably tanked his AVP from his day 1 performance, his stats are probably much kinder to him and do him many more favors if you remove Golden Spatula from him, right?
True. And I think Moji, if you guys like rerolls, he is the player to watch. Like, a lot of players globally actually come to him to learn his 2-cost reroll tempo, and they're very fun because they're extremely the tempo is very extreme. Like he will go very low in gold, roll super deep on 6-3-2, or when he's loose streaking, he will be willing to sack a lot of rounds before he starts rolling for his composition. So he takes a lot from playing in the CN Super server, which is how a lot of players actually have to play there. You have to go super low, lose streak, or you have to go super hard, win streak.
Right.
That sort of extreme tempo. He's really good at it. He pays a lot of time scouting the lobby and figuring out how much he needs to roll exactly to maintain tempo.
Interesting. Okay, it's funny because I feel like a lot of players spend a lot of time scouting during stage 2 to try and figure out direction, and then oftentimes from there they spend more time figuring out positioning, right? Like later on in the game when they're scouting, they're thinking more about themselves and less about other players' lines. That's pretty unique, I think, for a player to use active attention toward figuring out the tempo of the lobby. That's hard to do. It's very hard to do. There's probably very few players who can do it in general, right?
Yes. And, a lot of times you hear in VOD reviewing, it's like, oh, I rolled once too much on this stage, or that player didn't roll once enough. And that's why I have some reservations. I think he's the best out of TW, but the problem is his style is so hard to play and so finicky at the top level, especially
he's not on 100%.
Yeah, and sometimes apart. Like EMEA and like NA, if you just look at their boards and you misjudge how much they're going to roll or maintain their own tempo, it's very easy to go wrong. So I think he's pretty cocky, but realistically, I feel like if he can finish like above half, I'd be pretty happy.
Okay. Yeah, I did put him in the lower tiers, in the lowest tier. I put him in D. I gave him a D+.
That's a little too low.
The reality is somebody has to be in the D tier.
Okay.
And I'm not I put him at D+. I don't think he's the bottom of the bottom, and again, he's not someone I'm saying, confident enough.
He has one of the best records in terms of Golden Spatula scrims against all of the best players. So all of the players play Golden Spatula. Moji has one of the best scrim results.
It's very possible then that by the time this episode releases that my score has changed on Moji.
I'm placing it lower because it's his first time at Worlds.
Yeah.
So I think nobody, it's usually really hard to do well.
All right, let's move on to the last APAC rep, which we have. Asta. Asta 1. I don't know if the 1 is said, but Asta.
Okay, so this is an interesting player because I think he is the hero that Vietnam got, but probably not the hero that they deserved. Or wanted, yeah. Vietnam, I think they're a great region. They have a ton of heavyweights, but unfortunately there was a lot of flukes in that region, and Asta ended up going in based on QP for that region. And he actually qualified fairly early on in terms of, he qualified by Cup 3. So the way he did it...
Wow. So that was actually... He qualified through Cup 3 not because of a dominant performance, but because everyone else from Vietnam just fell apart?
So the next two Vietnamese players, I think it was Royal and YBY1, they only managed to qualify into Day 2 once out of 3 cups.
That's rough.
So it was a very rough split for Vietnam. Very, very rough. And I don't think anyone expected Asta to get here. He's more close with the KND squad in Vietnam. And his playstyle is very fun to watch. I will say he's fun to watch.
Oh, I can tell just by the stats that we'll get into that he's extremely fun to watch.
Yes. He had the highest first place rate in the 3 cups. 22% first place rate. But he mostly did it on day 1, which is a massive caveat.
Yeah.
So his stats basically say that, he did great day 1, day 2... it kind of didn't go so high.
Well, even in the data, you can see. So he is the second highest, and highest if you discount some of the China stats because some of them have very low sample size. We'll get into that. That's a whole other thing. But if you discount China, he is the highest first or 8th rate among the entire field.
Not surprised.
Has a 50% top 4 rate and a 20% first rate, which means this guy is hardly ever going top 4. But when he does, he's just going first.
I thought I made a mistake when I was doing his stats. So what his stats look like, one of his cups, he went first place 5 times out of 6 games on day 1, and then only went 6th and 7th. So he's very difficult to judge from
really
the stats.
Volatile, yeah.
Plays a lot of fortune, and the way he qualified, I think, is super memorable. He played every single 5 cost in the pool.
Like on one board, you mean?
On one board, 9 fortune.
Nice.
And he qualified. So it's like, well,
Yeah.
Fortune is with him.
So 4.9 average over 60 games. It's definitely not That is quite
He was
bad.
also limit testing in Golden Spatula Cup. Like his last day in GS, he averaged lower than his 7th. So he's definitely trying some things out.
Yeah.
I wouldn't count it.
It is hard. I mean, I think 4.9, when you include the Tactician's Cups, for me, it's hard to swallow that number because you are assuming you're playing against a relatively speaking weaker field because you're playing against the worst players in your region, and you are, especially if you're making it to Worlds, you're expected to have a tangible edge on all of those players, right? So the fact that
that's why stats aren't everything.
He's dominating. That's true. He's dominating day 1, and then when he gets to day 2, like maybe it was just variance, maybe it was his inability to pub stomp like he was on day 1, or maybe it's like a mental thing. Like it could be a million different factors. It is hard to say to see from the stats or to judge from the stats. I will say 4.9 average is nearly half a placement worse than the second worst performer at the World Championship.
Really?
Yeah, really? 4.5 is the second worst, which is Moji.
APAC first. Let's go, boys. We got a first already.
right. First and second. Gold and silver, baby. So that is a hard pill for me to swallow. For that reason, I put him as my lowest rank in the field. I put him at a D. And again, though, I want to caveat this with the fact that at the most elite level, being the worst person at the World Championship is still extremely elite. And I do think on the right day, anybody could win. That's TFT, right? Like Asta clearly knows how to turn it on. Yep. Like this 20% top 1 rate, I mean, that could carry him through quite a bit of the group stage, and then we're playing checkmate format. Like, I would take Asta over a lot of players in the field in the finals because this guy knows how to go first.
Because, like, we didn't play checkmate the entire way in APAC. I'm not sure if checkmate was...
he was playing checkmate.
That's true. Did you guys play checkmate in Americas?
We didn't.
Okay. No. So that's actually something to watch for Worlds.
Yeah, because there are a lot of players in the field, and again, I know I talk about the numbers a lot, and it is like a bit of a meme or whatever, but there are a lot of players who have done very well, and despite the fact that they've performed well, have struggled to net wins in the same way as other players, even with sample sizes like 60 or 70 games, which that number can swing wildly. I don't know the math. I'm not going to pretend to know like how accurate 60 or 70 games of TFT actually is. It's probably not that accurate. Yeah. But I do feel like 20% win rate over 60 games is an interesting enough number that you have to at least ask the question, is this guy converting better than the average player in his region? And I think the answer is probably yes.
Yeah, for sure. Vietnam, still a great region. I'm not sure about your representative this time, but you guys are still great.
Okay, now, do you think we have time to do Americas?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's go into the Americas, then we can kind of wrap up afterwards. So, how do we want to do this? Do you want to, like, pose questions to me?
Sure. You go on, and I'll ask questions cool. Fill in, like, what I want to know.
All right, so I'm going to kick it off with our first, I guess our perceived first seed. Not our actual first seed, but it's Dish Soap. Dish Soap is coming in with the best AVP across all the Americas.
Jeez.
3.7. 3.73. And when you compare this to his career average, which is roughly 3.9-ish since I started tracking data. So since set 7, close enough to like the modern age of TFT. It's minus 0.2 better than his career average. So his second best set of all time, second only to set 8 when he had a really, really strong performance alongside Setsuko and Weijin Iverson. The things that always stand out to me about Dish Soap are kind of the similar things we were talking about Bintam, where traditionally high top 4 rate, high win rate, low 8th rate. Those are like the 3 keys to success. It's like it's as obvious as it comes.
There are very few players that break that trend in the top.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing about Dish Soap in general is he always pairs this with one of the highest AVPs as well. And so that can mean a few different things. The most general statement, and it's a silly blanket statement about pretty much all top players, is that he's really good at not leaving points on the table, right? He's very good at converting one additional placement when he can. And that's just evident across his career. And this set's been no different. I think he's the best player from the Americas. He's not invincible. He's not invulnerable. He got day 1 at the Tacticians Cup 3.
I remember the cup so well. Like, there was a sniper cup where he was just, like, swapping every single round, and he managed to claw so many placements. I think it was Cup 2, but that was very impressive, like, for me to watch.
He had a fantastic season. He went top 8 in the first 2 cups, nearly locked in his World's qualification spot by the 3rd cup, and the fact that he went out in day 1 opened up the field for Mismatched Socks to get the spot through qualification
that's how
when
it
he won the
happened.
event. Yeah. It was a really crazy story because once he went out, Greya also went out day 1, and Asa also went out day 1. So the 3 of
TFT coaching. You can
That's
use my
right.
discount, Clement.
It was a great
Just
service.
repping.
I'm subscribed. I keep my subscription active all the time.
Doing it for you, Asa. Love you.
Once he went out in day 1, it really opened up the field and allowed
true.
Mismatched Socks to swoop in and get that spot from him. And he was really upset about it.
Yeah, he always brings something new to like each of the cups. So I was I didn't pay that much attention to the final cup and the final golden special. Do you think he had like comp tendencies in that area?
I mean, at
Or,
the
like,
Golden Spatula, off the top of my head, I know his most played comp was Reapers, like most Americans.
I like most TFT players.
I mean, there definitely were like some players in the Americas that were leaning other ways. Like some of the Brazilians were playing more AP. Sox was playing a lot of duelists. But he was definitely one of the Americans that would lean towards the AD melee lines. The thing about Dishop in general, I remember I talked to him in set 8. And I asked him what he thought his edge on the field was, and his response to me was, I have more game plans than the rest of the region. That's kind of his MO. He does his homework. The joke is that everyone steals Dishop's homework. And so he is the player that he preps largely by himself, as far as I know, and is one of those critical thinkers that really likes to come to conclusions
Doesn't
on his
he
own.
have a coach called Froden?
That's true. He does have a coach named Froden.
TFT
now.
Academy, check that out.
That's right. So yeah, anyway, that's Dishop.
Yeah, I watch this player so much. He's my most watched player out of North America. I think he's like just super solid in terms of getting all the mechanics down, and like he thinks outside the box in terms of like how the fight's gonna go and stuff like that. So I just learned so much from him. I'm always rooting for Dishop as well.
Yep, definitely fantastic. For that reason, I put him as S tier, even in the world. I think he is the favorite among the North Americans, and in general, I would say this is the best group of players the Americas or North America has ever sent to the World Championship. So for him to be leading that pack, I think is just so poetic. Moving on, we've got the next NA rep is it's my favorite. If anyone heard me on the North America or on the Americas broadcast, I was extremely biased.
I know.
It's Tri-State's very own, the King of New York. It's Pakigam.
Oh boy, Pakigam. So I'm just gonna read his stats a little bit, so you don't have to do all the work. But it's like, very close AVP coming in, 3.77, second best out of your North American representatives.
Yeah.
I wanted to know, like, would you rank him, like, I know less about this player, but how far is he from Dish Soap if his stats are so close, honestly?
Yeah. So I want to talk more historically first.
Go.
So Pakigam, in terms of like him being outside the Big Four, I think a lot of people in North America don't think about Pakigam as like a contender for the Big Four. I think the people who know Pakigam, though, the people who watch him, understand that Pakigam, when he's in form, is among the most elite in North America. Okay. In fact, if you remove his worst set of all time, if everybody in North America dropped their worst set, not just him,
cooking the books, boys.
If everybody in North America dropped their worst set, his stats would be among the Big Four. He, back in set 5, was the favorite among all North Americans. We talked to all the top players. Everybody that I spoke to leading into the regional finals said that Pakigam is the favorite to qualify for Worlds. And he should have been to Worlds. I don't know if you were watching North America, or even, were you in TFT at the time?
Set 5, no, not really, yeah.
So there's this draconic trait. I don't know if you know anything about that, but
I can't remember it.
It was the econ trait of set 5. And Spencer, another North American, essentially got bailed out by just like imagine like a crazy fortune cash out that was just like the perfect cash. Like he only wins if it's this specific cash out that happens. And Pakigam, I believe in that same game, is just stuck on a 1-star 4 cost. And he like didn't misplay. He just like never upgraded his unit. and he piloted it to like a 4th place finish regardless. It was a really impressive game. And he, because of that, lost the tiebreaker, I believe, to go to the World Championship.
Tiebreakers are the hardest.
It was horrible. It was terrible. And since then, he's never made it past day 1 of a regional final since set 5. He hasn't competed in all of them. Though he competed in set 7, didn't make it past then. He competed in set 10, didn't make it past then. The thing about Pocky, he's kind of been like in and out. So it's hard to really know when he's on. But over the last 2 sets, sets 10 and 11, his stats have been phenomenal. He clearly is caring about the game again. And the thing that stands out to me is Pocky, I believe apart from set 9, I have to check the stat, maybe even with set 9, he's top 8. He's placed top 8 at the first tournament of every set. So he's very good at
figuring things out earlier than everyone.
Exactly. Yeah. Super intuitive player. And yeah, the stats are good. He also has the lowest 8th rate in the field.
3.03%.
That's pretty low. Over 66 games. Yeah. So, I mean, obviously the margins there of like 3% versus 4% is like...
it's around a year.
Yeah, exactly. But Pokygom in general, I would consider his playstyle to be the kind of player who is... willing to play on a razor's edge, and he's very good. It's actually funny, this set, I feel like his stats aren't reflecting his kind of big picture where he normally is, which is usually low top 4 rate, exceptionally high top 1 rate. He's very good at converting high roll into first places. That is if I had to say one thing about Pocky, that is what he is. He's very good at placing first when he needs to.
I heard like he does a lot of his own math by himself and figures out the optimization. A lot of people can only read the stats, but if you can do the math yourself, that's a huge edge.
Yep. All right, let's move on. Next up, we've got Greya.
This is someone that I think outside of North America, very few people would have heard.
And even in North America, to be honest. So Greya he's been in and out of the scene, kind of on the fringes, since as far back as set 5, as far back that's as far back as I know, at least, where he played under a different tag, Melton Heart. And he would enter some events. He played in the Challenger Series. I know he had, if I remember correctly, he had 2 final day finishes in the Challenger Series. I think he placed as high as 5th. It was out of 16, so it was nothing too crazy. And last set 10, he entered one event. First time we really saw him in the modern era of TFT, and he made final day. He doesn't enter anything else. Then he comes back this set. He's dominating. He's popping off on ladder with very low game count. He just has he had like a 74, 75% top 4 rate for a large portion of the set. And then he starts entering stuff, and he's just making final day at every cup. He eventually gets day 1 at Tacticians Cup 3, but then comes the Golden Spatula, and he makes this amazing run, and he wins the entire event. And one thing that's interesting is he was the highest game count of Syndra, like Dryad Syndra, in the entire Americas field, which, post the nerfs that have come over the last few patches, it's not a comp that you're leaning into. And he even said, he said, I'm not angling it. I don't want to play this, but I felt I had a high roll spot for this suboptimal line, so it would be silly to not play it. So he's one of the North Americans that is willing to play suboptimal lines. I actually don't know how many of those we have, though.
I will say that, for general big picture purposes, at least from the CN meta, the saying is that you need to get 2 out of 3 2-starred among Rek'Sai, Ahri, and Kindred.
Okay.
You need that on 2-1.
You need stacks from 2-1.
Yeah, from get-go to play the line. So I'm going to be very interested if he's willing to play
he did get bailed out by some, Dryad Emblem. The one game I remember on stream.
That's a norm. That's a norm.
Yeah, it was like a
Nobody wants spats these days, so that's fine.
Right. Well, it was definitely a stage 5 carousel, Dryad Emblem. It's fine.
Okay.
He knew it was coming.
Yeah, he knew.
But so Greya, exceptional. If you could probably call this a rookie set. It's kind of weird saying that because he's been around
for a while.
And the other thing is Pokygom and him have talked about the game for the entirety of their time in TFT.
I saw the retweet.
Yeah. I remember actually, I interviewed Pocky in set 9. Greya at the time was not playing TFT at all. And in this interview, Pocky is talking about Melton Heart, saying when he plays, I always talk to him about the game. He's really good, but he doesn't really play all that much. And then 2 sets later, Greya comes back and pops off.
That's what I want to ask you about. Is the hype from Pakigam real, or is it a friendly glaze?
No.
Because he said could be better than Dish Soap and Setsuko at his peak.
It is real. It is
real.
It is,
Okay.
Paki is genuinely convinced that Greya has among the highest cap in all of North America.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. All right, that's enough glaze for Greya, though.
That's insane.
Just to do it quickly, because I didn't do the tiers, but we had
sure.
Dish Soap and S. We agreed on that.
Yep.
I have Pakigam in A. I have him as an A+, and I also have Greya as an A+. This might be high for some people. This is a little North American bias.
I think for first time at Worlds, I think it's always hard for me to place like players first time at Worlds that high.
Okay, that's fair. Okay. All right. Moving on. Mismatch Socks. You know this guy?
Oh, bro, I learned... Am I allowed to say it? Master E. I won't call it. I won't say the comp name for your sponsors.
Thank you.
I learned Master E from this guy, so I'm very familiar with his style. I love his high tempo play, and I also really like the tech he brings on every cup, which is something Asa also shared with me.
He brought some really cool tech to this past cup, right? And you tweeted about it. You want to talk about it a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So we were basically going through his match histories, and we're like, wait a minute. We thought this line was unplayable. Why is this dude going... He was literally going like 7 to 8 games of Reapers, not Reapers, Duelists in a row, and playing them from some really weird spots. So typically for Duelists, most players will only play this line if they can find Keepers or find Vintage. Yeah. Those are like the two most common.
Two one lines.
But he's playing them through Idealism. He's playing them through Not Today.
Yep. Too Much Candy.
Those are the 3 big lines that I thought like most people are not really willing to explore with.
When I think of the history of Mismatch Socks, when I first started coming up, actually the first set I ever played TFT to really try and learn the game was set 2. And at that time, I remember I was a silver gold player or something, and I looked at the top of the leaderboards, and Mismatch Socks is 2 accounts at like 1800 LP and 1700 LP.
I remember that area.
And I remember thinking, even if I hit Masters right now, I will be closer to where I started than I will be to him.
That's so true.
And so this guy, pioneered so much TFT in the early days. He was the father of flex play. I remember an interview he did with Doa where he's talking all about front-loaded damage versus back-loaded damage and the prioritization of items in those 2 different ways of playing Kale in set 4. And I think Socks opened up the eyes of a lot of North Americans to like critical thinking in TFT. Yeah. It's not just about traits. It's not just about compositions. It's about what is the function of this unit? What is the function of this win condition? And for that reason, I think the future sets that started to maybe not reward flex play as we knew it, we started to see like the decline of Socks. And this is the first time that we really have seen him in form since set 4. And for what it's worth, back in set 4, he had 10 more. So right now, 73 games played, 3.89. That's an exceptional AVP for that many games. In set 4, he had about 10 more games and minus 0.2 AVP. It was a 3.7 or 3.65 AVP over 80 some games. So just to give you a reference point of how good he was in set 4, the way I've described Mismatch Socks right now is that I don't think this is Mismatch Socks with the same edge that we saw him in his peak, but it reminds us, if only for a moment, of the player he once was in NA.
Imagine if he could like full-time TFT and the meta was a little bit more open. I just want to tell the audience about flex play because I think even today, most of us use the term flex play the way that Mismatch Socks taught us about.
Yeah.
And flex play doesn't mean that you play a ton of different compositions, but it actually means you play within one comp, but you have different methods of transitioning to get to that final point where you want the optimal stage of your composition. And I think he is a player that my biggest worry is he going to have enough of those comps? We talk about a lot of the players like Disso, like Bintam, that have enough lines, but he is definitely going in a different direction where he's playing a very uncontested line, but understanding the limits of it very well.
Yep, that makes sense. All right, let's move on. So now we've got not a North American rep, but an American rep We've got Aoso Lucas from Brazil. So let's take a look. So I don't know. Do you know much about Lucas?
I keyed in all the stats for Worlds, so I know he's been there a couple times.
Yes, he has. He was at Worlds back in sets 5 and 6. Back then, I would consider him among the elites in Brazil. These days, I don't think even most Brazilians wouldn't consider him in like the elite tier. He's kind of more like the veteran, the old man, the guy that was once amazing and is now good.
Yeah.
He struggled for most of the set, for what it's worth. I don't think he made it past day 2 at all. I think he got day 1 at least once. He's not someone that had a phenomenal run at the Cups, but he made it into the regional finals, the Golden Spatula, and went on a tear. This guy won so many games. And I will say, there's a few things. The first is, the times we saw him on broadcast, he was definitely high rolling.
Happens.
It happens.
Yeah.
The two moments I remember in particular is a game where he has like the perfect Reaper opening of the Darius Kiana. What's his name?
There's 4 traits, and that you feel all of them.
Yeah. The Malphite and the
Malphite,
other guy. Yorick. Thank you.
Yorick is very forgettable. I understand that.
He is. And he has like a 2-star Kiana on like 2-1 or 2-2.
Yeah,
and then the other
perfect
game,
transition.
He has. There's another game where he hit Recombab on 3-1 because of the Lilia augment, and has Spirosojin IE and Recombobs into Kaisa.
I saw that one. That was insane. Oh, now you mention it.
So he definitely had some high roll moments, and in fact his first place rate skyrocketed from before regional finals and after. I think his stats right now, 3.9 over 45 games, are more reflective of a great set of games at the Golden Spatula, more so than the entirety of his set. Because if you remove the Golden Spatula, his stats are among the worst at the region in the World Championship. So personally, I'm not sold on Lucas. I don't think he's bad by any means, but I wasn't entirely convinced by what I saw.
Okay, it's gonna be like a dark horse player. Do you
Yes.
think? Okay, so I'm gonna probably jump to the next Brazilian player, but which one is the Brazilian favorite?
Oh, it's not Lucas.
It's definitely the other
It's
one.
Bob Zera.
Okay.
Yeah. And we can do Bob Zera now while we're on the topic.
Yeah.
Bob Zera, for all that Lucas struggled throughout the entirety of the regular season, the Cups, Bob Zera was the opposite. He was second in overall qualifier points, only behind Mismatch Socks. He, going into the regional finals, the Golden Spatula, was top 5 expected players for most people that I spoke to. Or even if you look at the Don't Talk If You Don't Know power rankings, he was in the top 5 there, I believe. I don't know exactly where his final placement was, but I had him over players from North America like Wajan Iverson, Pakigam, and Greya, and I don't know how much you saw of his run at American Golden Spatula, but he got day 1, and he went out very early. It was not a convincing loss. It was very, very tough. And so he's a new face in Brazil. He's really only come up for the last couple sets. So while you can absolutely chalk it up to variance, I think it would be remiss to not acknowledge the fact that he hasn't had to play in a high pressure or a major event yet.
He'll get better like the more like top competitive games he goes through and stuff like that. Yeah.
And it does make me wonder though, if it is a pressure issue, which all he had to do to lock in his world spot to guarantee it was make day 2. So he had stuff to play for. It's not like he was playing for nothing at the Golden Spatula. He got day 1, and then the other player behind him also flamed out.
He's not a Moji or an Asta.
No, he's not.
Okay, I get it.
But it does make me wonder, if it is a pressure issue, what does that mean for the World Championship?
So how did he... I'm just checking his qualifications here. He qualified on...
He qualified through qualifier points, but it wasn't
points.
Guaranteed until after Ego Illusions from Brazil fell early in day 2.
Oh,
so
yeah, I remember.
Ego Illusions needed 11 or higher, yeah.
Ego talks with our scrim group a bit, so I was rooting for him.
A lot of people were, and for what it's worth, I think Bob Zera and Ego are the 2 best players in Brazil.
Okay.
So either one of them making it to the World Championship would have felt really good for the region.
Is Brazil breaking the drought? For finals? It's been a long drought. Do you think they're going to break it?
If Bobzera.
A long shot, basically.
I want to believe in Bobzera.
Uh-huh.
And if you had asked me this before the Golden Spatula, I would have said this is their best chance.
Okay.
The only reason, again, it's very, very possible it was a bad set of games, low variance, whatever. I do think, though, there's a chance that it's pressure. And
it's just a yes or no answer. Come on. Are you going yes or no?
I'm not convinced.
Okay,
no. I'm not. I do not think
Brazil will probably have to wait. All right.
Yeah, I think it's not this time, but it's coming.
Okay.
All right, so we've got two more. Let's go with our LATAM.
Yeah,
rep.
Michael, I see this guy all the time. I think this is going to be his third Worlds.
Yes, third one.
Yeah.
Which are you familiar with the Altanawe versus Michael?
I heard it on Twitter and people shouting obscenities, especially Soju just going in and backing up his bro. That was kind of funny, but I wasn't really sure what it was about.
Okay, so Altanawe and Michael are the two players kind of competing in the history of LATAM as like the historic GOAT. Altanawe and Michael each had 2 Worlds appearances. Altanawe, however, had 2 finals appearances. Michael has yet to make it to the top 8. However, Michael is perceived by like the general public to be the better player and has had a string of consistency in LATAM that is stronger than Altanawe's. Going into the Golden Spatula, the two of them were tied in qualifier points, which means they were playing heads up against one another. Whoever outplays the other makes it to the World Championship.
Spicy.
And to make it even better, they were tied in points for like 5 games straight. They were mirroring each other's placements game after game.
5 games?
It was something like, it might have been 4 games, but it was multiple. It was across multiple days. It was like the last 3 games of day 1 and then the first game of day 2, something like that. It was so cool to see. The two of them have so much respect for each other, and at the end of the day, Michael outplaced Altanawe, qualified for the World Championship.
Did they ever play each other like in
the same round? They did, yeah.
They did?
In one lobby, I believe. Yeah, in the final 2 games. But yeah, so Michael was able to seal the deal. Really cool story. He is the only player from the non-North American regions of the Americas that I put in S, and that's largely for his, accolades across the entirety of his career. He has a 3.9 AVP. That's certainly good enough to make a splash at the World Championship. And at this point, like when you're talking about 3.7 of Disso versus 3.9, it's such a small margin, especially across 18 games or so that you'd play at a World Championship. I think it's absolutely possible that we see Michael break his first top 8 this set.
Yeah, Michael's one of those players I get to snoop on a lot because he does have meta TFT.
Yeah,
so you can check his rolls.
You go deep into it then.
Oh, I love checking that stuff.
That's cool.
It's really fun.
That's
like
really cool.
The skill really is like saving low rolls.
Okay.
So you want to see how they do.
All right, let's move into our last representative, which is Wajin Iverson. Let me start this real quick, and then because I
know the final day story.
You know the final day story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think most people do. The short version is, if you didn't see it, Wajin Iverson, final day of the Golden Spatula, goes 8th 4 times in 6 games.
Yeah.
Not a good day. By any stretch of the imagination. It's not a good day for any player. It's especially not a good day for Wajin Iverson, who is in this big 4 of North America. He has had his worst set in recent memory. If you look at the stats, just the numbers. He made it to Worlds, so obviously it can't be that bad.
Yeah.
That came off the back of him having the best AVP. Still holding on to the best AVP on day 3, despite going 4/8 out of 6. But part of that was just we don't have to go into all of it. Just the way the finals happened. But what I've noticed about Wajin Iverson this set is that it feels like when he shows up and he's in form, it's the old Wajin. He's dominating. He made top 8 at Tacticians Cup 3. He dominated days 1 and 2 of the Golden Spatula. And some days he's just getting day 1 in the Tacticians Cup or going 8th 4 times in day 3 of the Golden Spatula. And so it feels to me like you just don't even know which player is showing up. And that doesn't seem like that uncommon in TFT, though. It is like such a mental game that if you're not in the
that
right
was the thing
headspace,
I'm like worried about because like just funny anecdote, but like 8-8 in Chinese, it's goodbye. it's the same pronunciation. Bye bye. So we'll see because like I always remember his third place run, and Wei Jin he's such a chill streamer. I used to watch him a lot as well. Just the way he optimized and how honest he is with chat, which I think is a very different approach from someone like Jisoo.
Yeah.
So it's always fun. I'm always rooting for him, but at the end of the day, where would you rank him?
I put him in the A tier.
Okay.
It's hard because I kind of put him A tier because if the good Wei Jin shows up, he's S tier, not a doubt in my mind. He's among the highest chances to win the entire event. And it would be so cool to see the run back of Title, Wet Jungler, and Wei Jin Iverson, who were 1-2-3 in the Set 9 World Championship. I would love to see that happen again, and maybe Wei Jin can come out on top. Casanova said something to me that I thought was really funny, where he's like, if anybody goes 8th 4 times in one day, I'm willing to just throw it out. Just like throw it out because like something clearly was happening, right? And we saw some egregious low roll on that day, and I don't know if it was like a mental issue after. I don't think that final day was representative of who he is. I think that he's going to do everything he can to be prepared, and I'm choosing to believe that the Wei Jin we see this weekend is the one that's in form and the one that's going to be able to pop off. That's definitely a personal thing.
Do you think like Dish is gonna come in and do like what North America did in set 10, where everyone was like sharing tech and getting up together? I think that's a great X factor.
I don't know. That's something we should look into because I don't know. That would be cool to find out if Dish Soap is actually sharing a bit more tech because of, like,
I think
the
at
caliber
Worlds
of player.
they definitely do.
Let's look into that tomorrow. That'd be cool. Okay, so that's actually everybody then. So like I said,
16 players.
8 there. So we went through 16 players. It actually went a little longer.
Let's recap the S's here. So we only have 2 S's. Title and Dish Soap.
Oh, 3. Bintum as well.
Oh, Bintum as well. Yeah.
So 3 S's.
Okay, so we bumped him up there.
Title, Dish Soap, Bintum in our S tier. Those are our favorites from the Americas and from APAC. We have a pretty wide spread. This is probably the widest
Michael
spread.
is A. Oh, yes. Michael's, where do you put it?
I would put Michael in S as well.
S, okay.
So 4 S's. Yeah. So this is the widest spread we'll probably talk about, I think, especially when you compare it to like CN and EMEA. I don't think we're going to have as many C's and D's in that spread. Yeah. But we'll find out, I guess. Yeah. We'll find out. I mean, there's also some like JOC players that like...
we have no info on. Yes.
But that's pretty much it. I feel like this is a pretty good first episode. We have rehearsal tomorrow, so...
It's really fun.
I think it'll be cool to like see how everything comes together and see like the show come to life. Are there any final thoughts on any of these players or anything you want to say, I guess, before we sign off?
I just want to say, like, I know there's a lot of perception in North America about the kind of format changes, but for the rest of the world, this has been such an improvement to our previous formats, and I'm really glad that APAC, especially KR, actually, has this reset format, is able to send all of their best players in, and, TW server obviously got a pretty big boost. Now that they're not capped within Southeast Asia, the 3 slots there. So I think the format is great. I know Riot has heard a lot of the complaints with it. Things are going to get better for sure. And I think that going forward, we are going to see a lot more of worlds like these, where half the players have been to World, where everything feels like an All-Stars. So, a lot to look forward to.
We didn't even say at the top of the show, we probably should have said this,
yes, we should have said it.
How crazy this world is. This is, you said, 16 returning players. It's the first time since Set 7 that we've had a representative from every World Championship before this one. Oof. And there's been 3 more since Set 7. So it's all the more impressive that it's happened since then. So I think there's going to be a lot of star power at this event, which naturally means there's going to be more heartbreak. Right, because there are more stakes in these players and more expectations than ever before. I cannot wait for it to actually take place. As a fan of the game, obviously we're going to be casting and we'll get like a more intimate look. But just as a fan of TFT, this feels like the event that I would want everyone I know to watch together. Because every single lobby is going to have someone worth watching in it.
I just want to say, like, final thought, I think this Worlds really proves that the format direction is going in the right space.
Okay.
You know, we can talk about execution, but direction-wise, I think we're getting there.
All right, well, that's going to do it for episode number 1 of Coffee with Casters. I sure hope that the video worked because we don't know. We can't take anything. We're in a.
Oh my god! Don't tell me
like
the batteries went out or something.
I hope not. We're in my hotel room right now. If the batteries on that went out or something, we still have the audio version, so we'll publish that. Yeah. Regardless, this has been a ton of fun. We're gonna try and do as many of these as we can. And I didn't even get a chance to talk about our sponsor for the show, Mauno, who hooked us up with this fancy little microphone right here. This is. Hold on, let me get this. Hold on. Here we go. The Mauno PD100X. It is a USB and XLR microphone. Has LED capabilities. I'm not going to do it right now while it's live because I don't want it to make any sounds from me rubbing my hands all over it. But it's got really cool LED lights that you can change. It's got a knob for volume, a fast mute button as well. XLR capabilities and USB, so you can just plug it right into your computer, which is what I'm doing right now, so we can record.
You just took it out the box like 10 minutes before.
Yep, set it up and we're good to go.
Perfectly. Wow.
So thank you so much to Mauno for hooking us up with this. It's been great just to have something we can use in the hotel room. And that's pretty much it. So I don't know where this is going to be posted or how you can watch more, but make sure you follow Clement and I on Twitter. My Twitter is @gangly_. Yours is Clement.
At Clement Chu.
Clement Chu.
Oh.
So make sure to just follow us and we'll figure out where we're posting these. That's going to do it for episode number 1, Coffee with Casters. We'll see you next time.
See you at Tactician's Crown.
That's right.